Amen. All right. Well, we're back in the book of Ecclesiastes again, as I mentioned tonight. Book of Ecclesiastes. You can turn there to chapter 11. Someone's getting a little ahead of the game on the slides there. Don't look. It's a top secret, okay? Go back to the beginning there when you get a second. When I was a teenager, I can distinctly recall a time when I was talking with my dad about how busy life can be and about how fast time goes by. I don't know if I wasn't a normal teen or maybe Dad was just talking about how fast things went and how busy life was and I was talking with him. I don't remember, but I remember my dad saying, "It never slows down. Life only goes faster. Time only seems to go faster." And, we think that oftentimes we think, well, if we just get past, this week, then life will slow down. If we just get past this big event, if we just get past the wedding that I'm planning, or if we just get past, if I can just get to retirement or whatever it is, you think, life might slow down. And I don't know, that phrase that Dad said, it never slows down, it only goes faster. That really stuck with me, and as I have grown older, I've really found that to be true. Perhaps you have too. In his book, Living Life Backwards, which is somewhat of a commentary on Ecclesiastes, a man named David Gibson, he says, "Inside every old person is a young person wondering what happened." Wondering what happened, and probably wondering what happened in many different regards, many different ways. When you look at yourself in the mirror, you might not think like you look, And oftentimes, that's why older folks get hurt. Not to drag Neil under the bus, he's not here. I asked Sandy, I said, "Sandy, what happened?" He said, "Well, he was doing something he wasn't supposed to be doing. He was rushing, he was rushing down the driveway, trying to catch the neighbor." I'm sure in Neil's youth, that would have been no problem to run over there and catch the neighbor, but he's trying to hurry down the driveway, and he trips and falls and gets hurt. Inside every old person is a young person wondering what happened. I didn't say Neil was old, so don't tell him that, okay? If various people here tonight, if you could tell us, if you could tell all of these stories of unexpected turns that your life has taken over the years, moments that came unexpectedly, without warning, seasons that unfolded without any clear explanation. Life moves very quickly, and along the way of life, it's filled with surprises and events that we could never have predicted. Good things and bad, right? I know James, the Apostle James, in his letter, he says that trials come unexpectedly to us. Good things come unexpectedly too. This week, someone came to the church office and they said, "Pastor Taylor, we want to buy the church a lawnmower." I said, "Oh, okay, that sounds great. I mean, if you ever have a gift, you want to say, 'Oh, will the church take this?' I'm sure we will, right?" So he went out and he bought a $6,000 mower and donated it to the church, completely unexpectedly. Good things come, bad things come unexpectedly in life. Last week we saw Solomon's counsel for faithful living in a world that we can't control. He said we should act wisely, we should act boldly, and we should act joyfully, even when life is uncertain. We learned those three key principles last week. We said act wisely because you are not sovereign. You should diversify your efforts in life. Don't put all your resources in one place because you can't predict every challenge and every outcome. Solomon said you should act boldly because you can't control the outcomes. You shouldn't wait for perfect conditions. He who watches the sky, he's not going to sow because he's worried about the weather. He said you can't let these opportunities pass you by because the conditions aren't just perfect in life. You have to let God's providence work as you live your life even when you don't understand it. And then he said you should act joyfully because your days are limited. Life is a gift, and we are called to live gratefully and invest our time well and not to postpone obedience. We saw that true security comes from fearing the Lord and trusting Him to govern the winds of change in life and to govern the future. The world may be unpredictable, but God's reign is certain, and His promises give us the courage that we need to act faithfully today. And that brought us down to verses 9 and 10. Solomon tonight, and as we look into these verses, he's going to turn our attention from the uncertainty of the world to the reality of our own lives and the seasons of life that we face as we live here. He encouraged us to act wisely and boldly and joyfully. And now he's going to remind us that youth is fleeting and that life is short. And the choices that we make in our early, younger days, the perspective that we have then, that's going to carry into our later years and shape how we live later on in life. So tonight, Solomon is going to give us 3 ways to approach life when we are young. And don't turn off your ears if you're a little older tonight, because he's speaking to you too. But he says, enjoy life fully, enjoy life wisely, enjoy life righteously. Let's read Ecclesiastes together tonight, Ecclesiastes 11, and we're going to wrap up reading verse 9 and 10 is what we're going to look at, but we're going to read down through the chapters, just 10 verses. Ecclesiastes chapter 11, beginning in verse 1. Cast thy bread upon the waters, for thou shalt find it after many days. Give a portion to 7 and also to 8, for thou knowest not what evil shall be upon the earth. If the clouds be full of rain, they empty themselves upon the earth, and if the tree falls toward the south or towards the north, in the place where the tree falleth, there it shall be. He that observeth the wind shall not sow, and he that regardeth the clouds shall not reap. As thou knowest not what is the way of the Spirit, nor how the bones grow in the womb of her that is with child, even so thou knowest not the works of God who maketh all. In the morning sow thy seed, and in the evening withhold not thine hand, for thou knowest not whether shall prosper, either this or that, or whether they both shall be alike good. Truly the light is sweet, and a pleasant thing it is for the eyes to behold the sun. But if a man live many years and rejoice in them all, yet let him remember the days of darkness, for they shall be many. All that cometh is vanity. And then verses 9 and 10 tonight, rejoice, O young man, in thy youth, and let thy heart cheer thee in the days of thy youth, and walk in the ways of thine heart and in the sight of thine eyes. But know thou that all these things God will bring thee into judgment. Remove sorrow from thy heart, and put away evil from thy flesh, for childhood and youth are vanity. Go back there to verse 9. Just take a look at that first section there. Rejoice, O young man, in thy youth, and let thy heart cheer thee in the days of thy youth. Message here is very clear from King Solomon. He's old and gray now. He's at the end of his life, and he's telling young people, while you are young, you should enjoy life fully. Now, verse 8 had the same command for all ages, but here's a special admonition to young people, to the youth. I don't know, maybe Solomon liked country music, because he says, you're going to miss this. It won't be like this for long. Enjoy your youth now, because it's fleeting. His words aren't just ancient advice here. They really should resonate with every generation. He's reminding young people that life passes us by quickly. It's a message that really hits home for those of us who are raising or have raised children or grandchildren, and you're watching time slip by. As a parent, I think about the passage in Luke chapter 2, speaking of Mary, the mother of Jesus. Luke 2:19 says, Mary treasured all of these things in her heart. At some point, we were young, and I'm talking about us parents now, grandparents, At some point, we were young. You had a child or two, and somehow in the raising and nurturing and growing up years of that child, we become old, right? It's really easy to miss things and to rush past the joys and the treasures of our little ones growing up, to end up on the other side, old and tired, without really taking joy in the days of our youth and our young families. And that's exactly what Solomon's saying here. Don't let the days of your youth, the fleeting joys, don't let that slip past uncherished. Like Mary, treasure up those things in your heart. Rejoice, take joy in life fully while it's still yours. And that principle isn't just for parents. That was one area of application that I thought of, but it touches every stage of life. Teenagers, singles, young married couples, parents, grandparents, great-grandparents. God's designed every season of your life, every season of life, with unique joys and lessons and opportunities for growth for you. Each stage of life comes with its own gifts and challenges, and if we're not careful, we can let that busyness and the worries of life and the pressure of life steal those blessings from us. Don't rush ahead of God. Live joyfully where He's called you right now. The call here is simple. Fully embrace the days God's given you and celebrate the joys, the little joys of life, the small moments. Recognize that every season, no matter what age you are, is an opportunity to honor God and to experience His goodness. Don't let life pass by without treasuring what He has placed right in front of you. Learn to enjoy the moment that God has placed you in today. The famous missionary Jim Elliot once said, "Wherever you are, be all the way there. Live to the hilt every situation you believe to be the will of God." Now, don't miss the fact that rejoicing here in verse 9 is a command. And he's delivered this command back in verse 8 to every age, but he's specifically talking to young people in verse 9. I think that might demonstrate that the discontent spirit that we often have, it starts when we're very young, doesn't it? Think about that. Think about maybe children yourself, maybe older folks, your kids, your grandkids. How does this work? You know, when you're 3, you ask a 3-year-old, you ask my daughter is about to turn 3. She turns 3 this week. And if you ask her how old she is, for the last 6 months, she'll tell you she's 3. Now, she knows she's not 3. She knows she's 2, but she wants to be 3. Recently, we started asking her how old she was and, when she had a birthday, how old she was going to be. And she started now to tell us that she's 4. And it starts that way, right? When we're 3, we want to be 4. And then immediately you're 4, and all of a sudden, I have 4.5, because you want to be 5. And then when you're 5, you want to be older. You want to be 16, and then you want to be 18. And 18, you want to be 21. We can't wait to get older. We can't wait to graduate from high school. We can't wait maybe to get our license, although some very strange young people today, that's becoming a thing of the past, I guess. But you can't wait to graduate college. And there's a positive side to that. I mean, you need to be looking ahead in life in some respects, but there's a negative side too. Solomon wants us to challenge that cultivation of discontentment, even at a young age. You don't necessarily outgrow that attitude either. So learn to enjoy the moment where God has placed you. C.S. Lewis was writing to a friend who had lived through World War II and had lost his wife to cancer. And he wrote to him, he said, "It is the Christian's duty to be as happy as he can be." It is the Christian's duty to be as happy, as content in life as he can be. Solomon says you should rejoice, you should enjoy life fully. But notice the second half there. He says you should enjoy life wisely. You should walk in the ways of thine heart and in the sight of thine eyes. And, we read that and we start to get a little nervous there. Rejoice, O young man, in thy youth. Let thy heart cheer thee in the days of thy youth. We said, okay, that sounds good. Walk in the ways of thine heart and in the sight of thine eyes. And we're, oh boy, what's he doing? He's supposed to be so wise, but he's telling young people to follow their desires, to do what they want to do, and he does. But then there's this qualifier. Keep reading there in verse 9. But know thou that for all these things God will bring thee into judgment. So the wise old king wants young people to enjoy life, to follow their heart's desires, to pursue their interests, but make sure whatever those things are, that they are things that God would bless. One of the leaders of the early church, I just so happened to have mentioned him this morning, Augustine, he said, "Love God and do what you will." What does he mean by that? Love God and do whatever you want. And at first that sounds crazy, but what does he mean? He was explaining 1 John's teaching that love is the defining mark of the true Christian. 1 John 4:8, God is love. His point's this: if a person truly loves God, if you love the Lord with all your heart and soul and mind and strength, then your desires and your actions will be shaped by that love. You will want to do God's will, and therefore your choices will naturally move towards what honors God and what benefits others. So he's not saying do whatever you feel like. He's not saying do whatever you want to do in your sinful self. He's saying when you genuinely love God, when that genuine love for the Lord governs your heart, the resulting actions are going to be righteous. In other words, right love produces right living. Young people often ask, what is God's will for my life? And a big part of that is just following the desires that God has given you in life and pursuing those desires to God's glory. I believe that's what Solomon's saying here. Enjoy life wisely. Do whatever you're interested in. Pursue your dreams. Enjoy your youth. Because when you're living for God, when love for God is at the root of your heart, then the fruit of your life is going to be good. Enjoy life all you can. Enjoy life as wisely as you can. Then notice verse 10. Enjoy life righteously. Enjoy life righteously. Look back at verse 10. Therefore remove sorrow from thy heart and put away evil from thy flesh, for childhood and youth are vanity. The word sorrow there, a pastor writes, he says it combines two ideas, anger and resentment. Anger and resentment. So when those coexist in a young person's heart, you end up with rebellion. Put away your anger and resentment. In other words, put away a rebellious, resentful spirit. Now remember, he's speaking to young people here. What a difference would it make if Christian teens took this counsel to heart? Put away a rebellious, resentful spirit. What a difference it could make in our homes. What a difference it could make in Christian marriages. What a difference if we could put away that rebellious and resentful spirit. I saw a cartoon of a husband and a wife. They were at a marriage counselor, and the wife was speaking regarding the husband. She said, and then, do you know what he did on our honeymoon just 21 years ago? You could put away a rebellious and resentful spirit. It's dangerous and detrimental to the heart. Solomon says, put it away, adjust your attitude. But he couples something else with resentment. Notice that last part of verse 10. Put away evil from thy flesh, for childhood and youth are vanity. I really like the summary John Phillips penned in his commentary on Ecclesiastes of this verse. He said if he was going to paraphrase this verse, it would read like this: stop worrying about things that make your heart sorrowful or resentful, and by all means, stop doing evil things with your flesh. He's speaking to young people. Don't be sorrowful, don't be resentful, rebellious, and stop doing evil things with your flesh. He wraps up verse 10. He says that childhood and youth are fleeting. In no time at all, you turn 16, and then 18, and then 21, and then 35, and then 50, and then 75, and before you know it, life is over. So during your days of youth and vitality, Solomon says, don't become resentful. Don't participate in evil, sinful activities with your body. It's really interesting. Solomon is going to, in his wisdom books, in the book of Proverbs and Ecclesiastes, he's going to talk more about sexual sin than just about any other topic. And he ought to know, because he wasted decades of his life enveloped in that sort of thing. He writes to the young men, Proverbs 5, about the danger of sexual promiscuity. And he writes that one participating in those sinful deeds, verse 11 of Proverbs 5, he says, at the end of your life, you're going to groan when your flesh and your body are consumed. It's not a warning that makes it into the movies. It doesn't get into the school textbooks. But sexual activity among young people today is causing a tidal wave of consequences. History actually gives us many examples of people who spent their youth chasing pleasure and power only to see their lives collapse in the end. And as I thought about that verse, Proverbs chapter 5 and verse 11, the end of your life you're going to groan when your flesh, your body is consumed, I could not help but think about a man named Al Capone. Al Capone was one of the most powerful crime bosses in American history. During Prohibition in the United States, Prohibition was that time period where alcohol was illegal, and it gave rise to a lot of organized crime. And Capone made millions and millions of dollars through bootlegging and gambling and prostitution. And from the outside, it looked like he had everything. He controlled the city of Chicago. He controlled a very powerful gang. He had money, he had influence, he had the ability to do whatever he wanted. But near the end of his life, the consequences of his lifestyle had caught up with him. Years of suffering from STDs and the mental deterioration that came with it left him the shell of the powerful man that he once was. And in his final days, he reportedly spent hours sitting alone in his Florida home, casting a fishing line into a small pond on his property, sometimes talking to people who weren't there. He was out of his mind because of the diseases that ravaged his body. The empire was gone, the power was gone, his mind faded away. The man who once controlled Chicago's underworld died at just 48 years old, broken in body and in mind. Thou mourn at last when thy flesh and thy body are consumed. It's really a sobering reminder of what Solomon is warning about here. You can spend your youth chasing pleasure, chasing power, chasing whatever your heart's desires. But if those desires are not governed by the fear of God, the end is not going to be joy. That's what it says in verse 9. So as we come to the conclusion this morning, or this evening, Daniel messed me up. He told me good morning right before the service, so it's Daniel's fault. I'm going to throw him under the bus. But as we come to a conclusion this evening, Solomon's counsel is very simple and very profound here in this chapter. He says, enjoy life fully. Live life wisely. Live life righteously. God created the world with beauty and laughter and relationships and meaningful work and moments that are worth savoring, things that we ought to, like Mary, treasure up in our hearts. Solomon says, it's a command, rejoice in the days of your youth. You should rejoice in the good things that God has done for you. You should receive life as the gift that it is. But he also reminds us that we should enjoy life wisely. Follow your interests, pursue your dreams, walk in the ways of your heart. But always remember that one day we will stand before God. Remember that apart from the redeeming grace of Christ, the Bible says our hearts are deceitful and desperately wicked. Right? Disney wants you to follow your heart, but they don't add that qualifier. Remember that God will bring you into judgment for all of these things. Our life under the sun is not about meaningless freedom, but as Christians, it is about accountable freedom. Solomon says, enjoy life righteously. Remove resentment from your heart. Put away sin from your life. Don't allow anger and bitterness and sinful habits to poison the years that God has given you. Youth is brief, life moves quickly, and the decisions that we make today shape the directions of our lives. But here's the wonderful truth of Scripture. It's never too old, you're never too old, it's never too late to begin living life this way. Some here tonight are young, and Solomon's words are a warning to you. Don't waste the best years of your life chasing things that will ultimately leave you empty. But others might be thinking, I already did that. I already wasted years chasing the wrong things. So maybe tonight you're looking back with regret. Maybe you think, I wish someone had told me this when I was 20. The good news of the gospel is that God's grace can meet you wherever you are. You can't go back and relive your youth, but you can start living wisely today, living righteously today, living joyfully today. And your testimony can be used by God to teach this truth to the next generation. Today you can remove resentment from your heart. Today you can put away sin from your life. Today you can begin walking with the Lord and enjoying the life that He's given to you. Because the goal of life is not simply to have a long life or a successful life by the world's standards. The goal is to have a God-honoring life. When you live that way, whether you're 60 or 16 or 80, you're going to discover something Solomon learned as well. Life lived in the fear of the Lord is not empty, it is full. So enjoy the life that God's given to you. Love Him with all of your heart. Walk with Him every day, because youth may be brief. It is. It's just a short time. But a life lived with God is never wasted. Let's bow for prayer this evening. Our Heavenly Father, we thank You for this challenge from